Heartbreak Emergency is grief amplified when attachment trauma hijacks letting go. You might feel like you are on fire. There is this intense urgency. This podcast is for those of us who experience endings as inconsolable. The grief of the ending doesn't end. It's not a temporary experience to move through. We enter a world of heartbreak. And we stay there, potentially, for a number of years, or at least I did. I have. Revisit this place of heartbreak. The only way to manage, I'm not even going to say survive, is to speak the language of the tender-hearted. And if you know this language, this depth of aligning with a sadness that speaks to you with an honesty that you've never heard before, it's a spiritual emergency. As if you are receiving downloads of wisdom. A profound life review. Aligning with a deep longing. Not only for relief and resolution of the heartbreak, but at times the longing to be reunited with the beloved. Great challenge for those of us with some history of attachment trauma is that there's this merging and intertwining of our identity with the other person, a lack of differentiation. So if I am you and you are me, then when you leave, I don't exist. Heartbreak becomes the abyss of the annihilated self. There's a rhythm. There's a drumbeat, the drip, the drip, the drip. As if water, maybe not gentle, water torture on your forehead, on the top of your head, this continual reminder of loss, of the ending. This could be any kind of ending. It could be relationship, partner, romantic, marriage, divorce, family, estrangement, loss of a loved one, moving away from a friend that you just won't see again. This same drip, drip, drip is what I came to learn as the death headache. My father died when I was 14. It was sudden. It was a surprise. It was an accident. A tragic accident. And I can remember going to school, and there's this, at times a whisper, and other times a very loud voice saying, "Dad's dead, Dad's dead, Dad died." I sometimes think of this as a stick, the grief stick, poking me in the heart, sometimes just hitting me across the head. It's over. It's ended. Pay attention. Pay attention. It turns out that there's a neurobiological understanding of this intensity of the drumbeat, of the dripping, of the grief stick. The death headache is what I used to call it. Waking up. And you might know that experience. You wake up just a little earlier than you want. And the moment you wake up, there's almost 1 second, 2 seconds, if you're lucky, 3 seconds before this profound voice comes in, this very strong, loud voice. It says, "It's over." It's the voice of heartbreak. And the neurobiology is that we are hardwired so that attachment, connection, relationship is survival. is how we orient to making sure we are safe. And if a very important primary connection, loved one, beloved, is gone, your brain's fear center, the amygdala, screams. It's an alarm. Feels as if your body cannot rest. I also refer to it as my chest is on fire. The great chasm of the Grand Canyon, my heart breaking open. This raw, exposed self. And yet you are expected to go to work, continue on in your other relationships, pretend everything is fine and okay, and you know that everything is not fine and okay. We are experiencing, in trauma terms, the phrase hyperarousal, intrusion, and constriction. The emergency feeling is the hyperarousal, the intensity that this is life or death, and that attachment is woven into the biology of survival, and the body is signaling to you that there is a mortal danger. And this is amplified when you have attachment trauma, some history of unintegrated attachment wounds, that any kind of separation is going to provoke and amplify the grief that is there, because it is waking up the dormant attachment trauma that says being left, endings equals death. The Anne Sexton poem where she says the end of the affair is always death. And that poem has always stuck with me, because when I first heard it, I immediately said, yes, I know what that's like. The three symptoms of the hyperarousal, intrusion, and constriction when we enter this state of profound heartbreak: feeling like your body's on fire, the urgency, the immediacy, the inability to rest is the hyperarousal. Intrusion is that voice that you can't turn it off. It's the message. Dad's dead. Dad died. It's over. And constriction is the shutting down, the freeze, the numbing, the trance, of which I'm going to talk about, turn it into an entire world, the realm. And you enter heartbreak's world. It is both derealization and depersonalization, in that you don't feel real and the world around you doesn't feel real. And so existence is surreal. Imagine sitting in a classroom. I'm in high school, age 14, the clock on the wall, taking a test, other students laughing, passing notes, talking. But I'm coexisting in both the external world of operating and participating in school, but simultaneously I have another foot and a connection into this heartbreak realm. And I can hear this very loud, profound calling, this alarm bell that says, life is not safe. But those around me don't hear it. Living in this level of heartbreak is very confusing. If you're confused living in a state of emergency in heartbreak and grief becomes amplified, if you're one of the inconsolable, then this podcast is for you. We're going to talk about how sadness points us towards a profound honesty, and heartbreak is an ongoing communication. We're trying to create some language and to learn from heartbreak what it needs and how we can survive the intensity of our losses. I like the image of a quilt. The intrusion idea of not being able to control the reminder of the death is also being bombarded with the image fragments, the montage of memories that runs through your mind. Sometimes this takes the form of images of seeing past experiences with your loved one, with the beloved, and sometimes it's in the form of remembering previous conversations, and that you find yourself maybe even speaking out loud imaginary conversations that you already had, want to have, need to have, both with the memory of the person that you've lost, but also with heartbreak itself. And think of this montage of memories and images and stories as pulling together a quilt. A quilt oftentimes is something warm. It's complete. Maybe it's an heirloom that we have inherited as part of our family. And the quilt is made up of swatches of material from a tablecloth, from curtains, from a bedspread. The heartbreak grief quilt that I'm referring to is not neatly put together. There's rips and holes, fragments. Some of the material, the edges are frayed. There's many, many loose threads. It's a mosaic. This podcast is about examining your grief quilt, working and reworking the memories, making sense of where you once were and where you're at today. Check in with your body in this moment. Name the sensations, your arms, your legs, your stomach, your spine, your feet, your fingers, your toes. Are you on fire? Are you crushed? Are you frozen? Is your chest is vibrating? Maybe it feels too painful to live in your skin. I love the images of waves crashing out of nowhere, earthquake tremors, even a volcano erupts. That's what it feels like when you live in this unpredictable realm of heartbreak. Waves of sadness vibrate through you. A profound coming undone, unraveling, shaking your world. And then it dissipates until the next tremor, until your heart erupts again in the volcanic lava of grief. I can remember years ago, I was living in Chicago, experiencing the intensity of this heartbreak in many ways for the first time. I was near Wacker Drive. And if you know anything about Chicago, on the east side, when it goes towards the lake, towards Lake Michigan, it literally stops. There's a turn, you turn around on Wacker Drive, you can no longer go any further. And I worked in an office, and I would experience the earthquakes and the profound waves of grief showing up out of nowhere. And I would be washed out into the ocean of heartbreak. And I could not function. I could not stay at the job, so I'd sneak out, and I'd walk to the end of Wacker Drive, and I'd stare out at Lake Michigan, and I'd cry. And knowing that this was a spiritual emergency, beyond this world, this depth of grief that was shaking me to my core. And although I do not have a connection or understanding of what it means to be Muslim, nonetheless, the cab drivers, some of whom were Muslim, would come to the edge of Wacker Drive in this cul-de-sac turnaround. I used to call it the street that goes nowhere. And we'd all be at the street that goes nowhere. The cab drivers who were Muslim would bring out their prayer mats and they would spend some time praying. And I would be standing in the middle of it crying, turning my head away, not trying to create too much attention or focus. And a seagull would fly through the sky. I'm not offering empty promises, and the invitation is for you to not do that to yourself either. We're not talking about the cliche of this too shall pass. We're not talking about you will be okay. We are not talking about time heals all wounds. We all know you're not okay. This is a podcast about sitting with the loss. In some ways, noticing that you're on fire and you can't look away. There's a painting I have seen. I don't know who painted it, and perhaps the woman is, and or it was painted in the 1800s, the turn of into the 1900s. It's a Victorian-looking woman in a turquoise dress, if I remember correctly, but her whole chest is on fire. She has this very plumes of smoke and flames are consuming her heart and chest. And I often like to imagine from that painting, the woman in the painting, she's living her life, and you see her walking down the street with her heart on fire. You see her sitting on a trolley car. You see her shopping. You see her at the dinner table saying, "Pass the mashed potatoes, please." And you can smell heartbreak burning. The whole time she's on fire. I share this image because I know what it's like to live in that world. If you know the language of heartbreak, then you speak the language of being tender-hearted. And me just saying these words, you know who you are. If you experience being sucked into the adventure, this real-world challenge, when you can't get away or get out, because, in fact, heartbreaking grief is a portal. It is a threshold. It is a gateway into this different world of existence, the world of loss, the world of endings. And most of us do not have experience of how to survive in this place. It's incredibly disorienting and frightening. My work has been for 23 years sitting across from others who are consumed and on fire in heartbreak, crushed by their own hope of relationship, crushed by love. My work is about attachment trauma, emotional neglect, and this profound relationship grief. I mentioned Lake Michigan, and I once at 2 a.m. in the morning when I couldn't sleep and I was living 2 blocks from Lake Michigan, and I felt a strong calling to create some kind of ritual at the lake at 2 a.m. in the morning to go to the beach in the darkness, stand at the edge of the water. And I wanted to give the loss, give the grief, I made up in my mind. I didn't really see it, but it felt so real. The mermaid. What happens in this realm of deep heartbreak is life starts to communicate to us through symbology and mythology and deep meaning. There is a depth of honesty that comes with sadness. And you not only review your life, but you're able to speak a different language with the world around you. And you realize the world is speaking back. And although I did not literally see a mermaid in Lake Michigan, my mind I gave myself permission with my mind to imagine. I so profoundly needed the mermaid to take my grief out into the lake, to take it away from me. So I stepped closer. I rolled up my pants. It was warm. It was summertime. It was not winter. And I stepped even more fully forward, trying to make contact with some kind of release. And in that moment in my brain, probably because I like T.S. Eliot's poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and at the end he talks about the mermaids wreathed in seaweed. They are singing each to each, and I do not think that they will sing to me. And his poem is about contemplative surrender into everything we will not be. And this deep desire to want to be more, to be fascinated by the great mystery of the mermaid, the representation of some type of culmination of spiritual arriving and knowing. And I don't think that the mermaids will sing to me. And maybe that's why my brain came up with that image, and I encountered the mermaid in Lake Michigan, and I said, please take my grief. Help me with my heartache. When you live in this place of attachment, trauma, hijacking, letting go, you notice there's an inversion of connection, which means you move from presence into absence, the positive space into the negative space. And you feel this profound, profound abyss beyond groundlessness. And I actually had an image once of falling. And I had a dream where I hit bottom. I really, it was it. And I, in this moment, still have the image of what it's like to this complete free fall, the absolute void, the nothingness of existence. Heartbreak uses the currency of emptiness and loneliness and longing. And you wander around, sometimes a wasteland, and back to T.S. Eliot. He has a poem called The Wasteland. Heartbreak includes many hours and days of just wandering through the wasteland of loss. I once was trying to make sense of these feelings. I was drawing pictures and notes and journaling. And I happened to be on a bus I'm looking out the window, the contemplative daydreaming of heartbreak. And I drew a picture. You're perhaps going to notice themes of water. And maybe that's because also in analytical psychology, they often talk about the ocean represents the unconscious and the collective unconscious. And depth psychology is about moving into the deepest part of your mind's ocean. And I had this image and I started drawing and I didn't really know what I was drawing. And when I was finished and I looked at it, it was an aerial view looking down onto an abandoned boat, a rowboat, floating in the middle of the ocean. It was the shape of a boat. And in the boat, only large enough for two people holding each other tightly. And in fact, they were not people, they were skeletons. And I remember after I drew that image, taking a step back, these ghosts of our losses, the memories of holding tightly, and now you're lost adrift in this big ocean of heartbreak. Grief is an oven. It cooks you. You enter the realm of being baked, kneaded, pounded, pretzeled into different shapes. I also once heard a lovely phrase, grief is a snow globe with your memory fragments inside. And randomly, out of your control, you feel this rattling and this shaking inside of your chest, or back to the death headache in your mind. The broken pieces of your heart rattling around. There's a Rumi poem about being trampled as if you're a grape, and the great trampler is stepping on you, turning you into juice so you can become wine. And you will say, stop, stop. This heartbreak is annihilating me. And the great trampler stuffs cotton in his ears and says, my work is not done, and you will praise me when it is. This is a time of great, great implosion. You're questioning your entire existence, your beliefs, questioning who you are. This is the rebirth. This is the change. You are going through some transformation of the grape becoming wine. I mentioned my father passing away, but also what happened at that time is my mother changed. She changed back. I'm grateful that she changed back. But when a loved one dies, the other people around you who loved that same loved one, they also change or die inside. There's a myth of Persephone being pulled into the underworld. Perhaps I will call it the realm of grief, the realm of heartbreak, where you're no longer living an everyday existence. You're now operating in the underworld of heartbreak. And perhaps that's where my mother went. And she went for 7 years. And I can remember speaking to other family members saying, Mom is different. And the others would affirm for me, yes, she is. And sometimes I've been asked, well, how was she different? She lost her spirit. It felt like her personality was different. but something that was essential to her heart closed off. She was still kind. She was still loving, but simultaneously disconnected and unavailable. This podcast is about joining you in the underworld, in the realm of heartbreak, where you're taking the quilt and looking at all the different pieces, trying to make sense of the montage of fragmented memories. You're inventorying your losses. In this moment, think of all the losses that you carry. Grief becomes amplified when we have this profound grief, and if there's an underlying attachment trauma that's unresolved, that too creates a network of loss that exaggerate not only what we're feeling today, but now we're reliving and feeling the attachment trauma of losses from the past simultaneously. It is complete overload and overwhelm to your nervous system. You can consider taking the inventory of these losses and go ahead and walk to a river the same way I went to Lake Michigan. Walk to a pond or a river or a stream and gather some stones. Name each loss out loud and throw it into the river. Grief is not here to be told what to do. It is not working on your timeline. You are not in charge. When you get sucked into this realm of grief and heartbreak, the realm will spit you out when it is done with you. The great trampler will stop trampling on you as the grape when it is done. There's no fighting against it. There's a practice of surrender and softening. There's some new skills that we need to learn of how to maneuver in this realm of heartbreak. Many years ago, I was living in Denver. I happened to, in my life, my adult life, lived in many places. And I was in Denver, and I had an acupuncture session. And I hadn't done that a lot, but it wasn't my first time. And it put me into a particular trance, extreme calm in my body and mind, almost as if I was floating and in a way dissociated. And I remember coming out of the acupuncturist's office, and there was a park across the street, and there was a couple, a man and a woman, and there was an argument taking place, but it was instantly uncomfortable. I felt concerned for her safety. And he was yelling at her. And the power dynamic, I could instantly observe his power over. And she was less status. Sitting down on a picnic bench, he is standing above her. Generally, if I would ever see something like that, I think I'm more to step to the side and observe to the degree to which it would escalate, and I would also potentially discern if I'm going to call the police. But because I had just come from this acupuncture session and I was in this trance of complete calm, I walked right over to that picnic bench. And I aligned my body language with her. And I looked at him directly in the eye. And then I looked at her and said, "Are you okay?" And I didn't necessarily believe her in that moment, but she said that she was okay. He got angry at me. He huffed and puffed and unleashed some bravado. And I was immune because of the acupuncture. Standing there looking at him. saying, I just want to make sure that you're okay, and if you need any help, let me know. I share that story to move into an application of a metaphor and not the literal story, but for you to be able to approach yourself, to look at the part of you that feels disempowered by the heartbreak. Maybe even heartbreak's bullying you, and that I use that example because he was not friendly. And sometimes this heartbreak is unforgiving and not friendly. And we need to develop the skill, the part of ourselves that can step right into the difficult struggle, look ourselves in the eye and say, are you okay? There is another Rumi poem. It is one of my favorite. It's called Bird Wings. And the opening line says, your grief for what you have lost lifts a mirror up to where you're bravely working. Expecting the worst, you look and instead here's the joyful face that you've been wanting to see. You start to discover yourself. Pull together fragments, not only of who you once were, but through this transformation, spiritual emergency becomes a spiritual rebirth. I love the word remember, R-E-member. You're a bunch of cut up pieces. Your arms and legs pulling yourself back together to remember yourself again. The quilt image, you're stitching yourself back together. You are the quilt. These conversations that we have with heartbreak are some of the most profound we will ever have. One of my favorite ideas and phrases is that all feelings, and in this case, the grief, in this case, the heartbreak, is a messenger. And if that's true, then we ask the question, what's the message? And what are you learning about the heartbreak and about yourself? And that's what this podcast is about, to ask the question, to pay attention to the messenger. To monitor our body, to monitor the experience of the hyperarousal, the intrusion, and the constriction. To know that we are living in a completely different world of heartbreak when this crushing loss shows up in our life. And it requires the language of the tender-hearted to speak the language of compassion and empathy and kindness. And to know that many people will not understand, will not quite be able to offer the fullness of acceptance towards your not letting it go, not moving on, being inconsolable. I'm looking for those of us who know this experience, and we can become a community for each other. It's like in the darkness, we're going to see beacons of light, like stars in the sky. We're out there. We know this depth of heartbreak. This is the beginning of a new podcast. I'm creating seasons. This is season 1. This is episode 1. I've structured this in the way I'm calling the body, the realm, and the conversation. Future episodes are going to follow that same structure. In closing, it is important for you to hear this. I want to affirm that this is an attachment emergency. This is a spiritual emergency. This is a heartbreak emergency. Thank you for listening.